all of that. I think we ought to have healthcare savings accounts where people get their own money, they invest, they keep it themselves, they use it for their healthcare. If they don't need it, they get to keep it. And if they make healthy decisions, they actually benefit financially from it, while, of course, providing them the opportunity to buy whatever healthcare they want, including a comprehensive healthcare that would provide them in case of a major illness. I believe in markets. I trust markets. I trust freedom.
Thank you. Response?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah. Given that more than half of all U.S. citizens have at least one chronic disease, such as diabetes, heart disease, or cancer, what can the federal government do to support schools, parents, and communities to build healthier lifestyles?
Well, the reality is healthcare costs have been going up double digit. It's one of the biggest challenges we face. Medical inflation is hurting all of us, and we pay for it. We are all paying for it. When people have to access their health care through emergency rooms, we pay dearly for that. And also, it can be so devastating to families. One incident can change your financial future forever. My neighbor Hal is a perfect example. He was just repairing his furnace one fall day, and the furnace blew up. He ended up with severe medical burns, ended up in St. Paul Ramsey Medical Center for 1.5 years. Even while he's in a coma, he went through his $1 million cap on his insurance. He went through all of his retirement, every piece of savings he had, and of course he had lost his house in the fire. He ended up with nothing. One situation, one emergency changed his life forever. I think that's wrong, and I think that's something we can, as a nation, can address, and we need to address. And so this is just a start. We know the healthcare reform bill isn't perfect at all. There's things in it we need to be fixing, but it's a place to start.
Well, I would just say, specifically to the point of what we do, I do think encouraging good, healthy living at the education level is important, starting at preschool and kindergarten. I mean, good nutrition habits, good exercise habits, getting kids involved in activities is very important, and then creating a lifestyle of it and modeling that lifestyle. When we read some of these obesity statistics that are coming out these days from some of the southern states, and ours is not exactly doing great, it is scary, because that does lead to higher costs. But we can bring down medical inflation by putting healthcare into the marketplace. Because inflation is greater at everything that's paid for by some sort of monopoly, especially government monopoly. And healthcare is probably a prime example.
Okay, well, thank you. The next question? The next question goes to you, Mr. Cramer. Farmers are operating without a farm bill. The U.S. Senate passed a version of the Farm Bill with $23.6 billion in savings. The U.S. House Agricultural Commission has offered a version with savings of $35 billion. However, it has not been brought to the floor for a vote. Much of proposed savings would come from reducing spending on nutrition programs, including school lunch. Do you support the Senate or the House version of the Farm Bill? And what level of spending do you support for federal nutrition programs?
Well, there's certainly things in both of them that I like a lot. I like the emphasis on a crop insurance program, and I've talked to dozens, if not hundreds, of farmers and met with lots of farm groups, and in fact as recently as last week with a whole bunch of them over a dinner meeting, and they all say the same thing. Give us a good crop insurance program, then get out of our way. The Senate in their crop insurance program passed a conservation compliance requirement for participating in the federal crop insurance program. It's something we haven't had since 1996, and it's something that literally every farmer and every farm group I've talked to rejects. Farmers in North Dakota know how to farm. They just need that safety net. Just today, we announced that the Public Service Commission, another, 18.6 million bushels of storage capacity in grain elevators. That doesn't even count all of the storage capacity that farmers have built on their own farms. Today's farmers are very savvy. In fact, many of the wheat farmers I've talked to who had a record crop this year still have last year's crop in the bins. They're getting ready for the price to go up even higher. They watch the weather in Brazil and the prices in Argentina, and they know how to market their own products. So they don't want that heavy-handed government. So we've got to pass, I think, a hybrid of the two. Get rid of that conservation compliance. We need an insurance program that helps farmers be successful, but we shouldn't require them to be wealthy if they have a tough year. But we need to keep them on the farm, because the family farm is not only the backbone of producing food for a hungry world, but it's the moral background of the central part of this country, including North Dakota.
Thank Ms. Ellison, would you like me to repeat the question?
I think I've got it.
Okay.
I'm a farm and rancher, so this one is near and dear to my heart. It's what I work on every day. But, you know, when we saw what just played out with regards to the federal farm bill in Congress, it just really depicts everything that's wrong with Congress. Here you had a bill that passed out of the Senate in a bipartisan way, I said, led by our two senators here, Conrad and Hoban. They crafted a good bill, a responsible bill. It's not a perfect bill. I also disagree with the conservation compliance issues in there, tying it in there. That needs to be removed. We move over to the House side. Chairman Lucas, Ranking Member Peterson put together a pretty good bill, has deeper cuts, but it's a solid bill. It's got the main things in there. Crop insurance plan, safety net, disaster aid. Those are the critical, important piece that our farmers, our bankers, our Main Street businesses, our implement dealers will all tell you they want in a farm bill. And then it all stops. It all just stops because it's derailed by these extreme groups. Club for Growth, who's given my opponent over $100 million in this race, or $100,000 in this race, $100,000.
No wonder, man.
In this race. And they said it's a key vote. They want to kill the farm bill, and they've held up their members and the people they've endorsed to make sure that they hold that position. That's wrong. We need a farm bill to come together for this state, for our farmers, for their certainty.
Mr. Cramer.
First of all, the Club for Growth has bundled about $50,000 for my campaign, but what's $50,000 in today's campaigns anymore? Part of why the Farm Bill hasn't passed is also because urban liberals don't like that cut in the food stamp and nutrition programs that you spoke of. Since Barack Obama became president, the food stamp program has doubled. 45 million people today are on food stamps. The House version, those extra cuts, simply require people to qualify for food stamps, to have to apply for them. And with that, they'll say, guess what? 2%. That's what that cut represents, 2% to the nutrition programs. Ladies and gentlemen, that I mentioned, we have a $16 trillion debt. Our children are being born owing over $50,000 to the federal government, or frankly, to other countries. We can't sustain that. I think a modest 2% in the food stamp program, providing an incentive for people to go work and apply for programs as opposed to simply just be entitled to them, seems like a reasonable thing to me.
Response?
Well, right now, across the state, the combines are rolling. People are taking in their harvest. Farmers are working early in the morning till late at night, and they won't quit until the job's done. I mean, Congress could learn a lot from that. That's what we failed here. The fact that we can't even get the bill to conference committee so that we can resolve these differences. There are some differences over the nutrition title. And this is nutrition that includes not just food stamps, but of course, senior citizen programs, school lunch programs, a lot of the things that most of us really support. But the middle ground is going to be found here. I don't think either side is exactly right on it. We'll find that part that we can agree on with regards to the nutrition title and move forward. But that's what we've got to do. And you don't step away from the table. You don't quit before the job is done. You stay there until you resolve these problems.
Thank you. Next question is for you, Ms. Gulson. Did either of you have anything more to ask or answer?
That's fine, thank you.
Thank you. What specifically would you recommend to strengthen and preserve Social Security and Medicare for current and future generations?
Well, these are two such incredibly important programs. As I've traveled around the state of North Dakota and talked to seniors, they will tell you that they've been some of the most important programs in their life. So with regards to Social Security, we've got to grow the economy. We've got to get more people contributing to the system. That's how we're going to help strengthen that fund. And we've got to stop raiding the Social Security Trust Fund. Allow that money to stay there and focus on working for seniors. I don't support privatization. That's the position that my opponent has supported. That's not where I think we should go. Medicare costs, it all's tied to medical inflation, healthcare costs going up. We've got to start reining in overall medical costs in order to sustain Medicare long term. We've got to keep people out of the hospital. It's the #1 high cost center of Medicare. And in order to do that, we're going to have to make sure that we focus a lot more on preventative ed, early testing, the kind of things that help keep our seniors out of there. And again, I don't support the voucher program. I think that's a program that's been suggested by my opponent and Paul Ryan and so many others. I think it's not time to give up on such a strong program. I think instead we focus on how we can help solve some of these problems and sustain it long term.
Thank you. Mr. Cramer?
Well, the two programs, Social Security and Medicare, are somewhat similar, but they're also quite different. With regard to Medicare, the Medicare trustees have stated that Medicare will be bankrupt in 2024. Stick your head in the sand and do nothing, which is what the Democrat leadership in Congress has done, is fine if you're going to die within the next 12 years. But if you plan to live 13, you're going to have to cut your benefits 24% just to keep it solvent. So we have to do something. I think we should draw a line. Maybe it's Paul Ryan's line at 55, maybe it's 50, maybe it's 52. I think that reasonable people can come together and draw that line and say that for everybody at this line or higher, we're not going to change the program. You don't have to worry. It's exactly as you know it today. Then we don't create this generational warfare that the Democrats love to use to divide people. We need to come together as a country. And then let's provide alternatives below the line of 55 or 52, 50. Maybe it's a premium support, maybe it's choices. I think choice works. That's how you bring down costs. What if we gave everybody premium support at a certain level, and let's say it's the exact level of Medicare. If you want to stay on Medicare as it is, you get to do that. That's what Barack Obama promised with Obamacare. He hasn't delivered it, but that's what he promised. But let's make that promise to everybody. But if you can find something a little less expensive that suits your needs, why don't you use that for that and keep the rest? If you want something that's a little bit more expensive, then you pay the difference. You know, I'm not afraid of choice. I don't support a voucher system, but I want to give people choices, because when you give people choices, guess what? The market responds appropriately.
Well, we know the history of Medicare. We have Medicare because the health insurance companies didn't want to insure our senior citizens. They dropped them off the plans. This is the plans. This is a high cost, a group of people to insure. They were not racing, they weren't competing for this group. And so opening it up to vouchers, allowing health insurance, again, the option of agreeing to cover or not cover our seniors is just too risky. That's not where I would go. On Social Security, I know a lot of people are very interested in privatization. I think that your code words for options are that. But what we've seen just in the last number of years, look what happened to retirement plans. I know in situations, the Bobcat workers in my district tell me they lost 30 to 40% of the value of their 401k plans just because of this recession. That's too risky. We can't do that with our seniors' retirement plans. It's great to incentivize savings. We should all have other retirement plans as well, but we need to protect Social Security so that our seniors have real economic security long term.
If I might, I also support means testing for Social Security. I think there are people at a certain level of means that don't require the whole thing. I think that it's appropriate for wealthier people perhaps not to get the same amount or the same percentage as somebody else. I think that's plenty appropriate. I think we do need to grow the pie. I think we can raise the age just a little bit more, maybe a month a year for a while, only for people under my line, remember. We're not talking about seniors, we're talking about younger people that aren't yet appropriate. And by the way, for those that would suggest that somehow the stock market or private investment is so risky, do I need to remind you, we have a $16 trillion federal debt. Do you really trust the federal government's investments versus, say, somebody else?
My own response there is, you draw that line at 55. Remember, someone who's 54 has been paying into the system for a long time. This is our system. We contribute to it. This is not an entitlement. So they've already been contributing a long time. I disagree with that. I also disagree with raising the age. The age is set to go up to 67. Over the next 15 years. I think that's an adequate age. If we were going to look at any additional things, I would look at the cap. I would look at raising the cap by which we all contribute. I think that's one of the areas that we can find more revenue for the system as well.
Quick question for both of you. The cap you mentioned is now at $110,000. So anyone making over $110,000 no longer pays into Social Security.
That's right.
Opinions on that from either of you? Where would it be?
Yeah, again, and that's an area that I think we should be discussing. I think we could either raise the cap or remove it completely. I think we should be contributing longer.
And I think we could be working longer. I'd rather see people being productive for another half a year of their life. 67, I got news for you, especially 15 years from now. I plan to be very productive at the age of 67. I'm not surprised my opponent wants to raise the cap. She voted for 9 tax increases when she was in the legislature. I'm not surprised she wants to continue to do that. But that's not the challenge for Social Security isn't more revenue. I think that we can deal with it on the other side. If we grew it by 1 month a year beyond 67, starting, and by the way, remember my line, 55, 53, 52, whatever we decide. It's a choice under that. If you want the old Medicare program, you can have that. That's one of the choices.
Thank you. And back to you, Mr. Cramer. North Dakota leaders are in near consensus on the need for a national energy policy. Do you agree? If so, what should it include relative to oil, including refining and pipelines, coal and wind energy?
Well, thank you for the question, and yes, I understand that they're nearly in consensus. And I think it's a wonderful thing to say that we need a national energy policy. Let me tell you what I think it ought to be. It doesn't need to be nearly as complicated as a lot of people say it is. What it needs to be is, what they need is certainty in environmental regulation. National energy policy ought to be driven not by the federal government, it ought to be driven by the consumer. The consumer ought to be able to choose what kind of a car they drive, for example. They ought to be able to choose the fuel of their choice. They ought to be able to choose collectively how they want their electricity generated. I regulate utilities for a living. Utilities don't mind any type of generation as long as I guarantee that they get to recover the costs from the ratepayer. But I say, wait a minute, before you decide to use that more expensive fuel, let's consider a less expensive fuel on behalf of the ratepayer. I think consumer choice ought to drive energy policy in this country, not perverse incentives. See, I'm interested in this idea that somehow we created certainty for the oil industry. I'd like to know what those tax breaks are for the oil industry that people speak of, as though they're equivalent to some sort of a subsidy. Allowing them to deduct their expenses for example, intangible drilling costs, is just allowing them to deduct their expenses. It's not a subsidy.
Thank you. Ms. Gullison?
Well, I absolutely agree that we need, to do more of what we're doing here in this great state. We are an energy production model for the nation, and we should be doing more of it. What we're doing right now, of course, with oil production is tantamount to nothing that we've ever seen before. And I think nobody even anticipated. We certainly didn't 30 years ago, we didn't 20 years ago. What's made a big difference there, of course, is advanced research and development. Much of that has been funded through government support. We see there's 2 companies right now that have just are part of the Regular Valley Research Corridor. These companies have developed innovative sensors and RFID technology that's really helping to drill down and help find that oil to a certainty. So there's lots of good things there. We need to support our coal industry. This has been such an important part of this state. And again, rein in EPA, which I do think is overreached. We need to support that industry. This is something we can do, but we should not ever let go of the fact that we have so much more in North Dakota. We have all the capacity. We grow the grains for renewables and bios. We are the Saudi Arabia of wind. We should not be giving up on that. All of that is so good for this country, and so we need to continue to support it.
Do either of you have more to say on that?
I might just say, I don't suggest we should give up on anything. What I'm saying is we ought to have a level playing field for everything. And then allow the consumer to decide by their choices which of the sources they want. We have an 800-year supply of lignite coal under the prairies of North Dakota. We're number 2 in the country in production of oil. We're number 6 in the country in exporting electricity, largely by burning coal. We are one of only 4 states that generates more than 10% of our own electricity using renewable sources without a mandate, I might add. All the while we meet all ambient air quality standards as prescribed by the EPA. I know what we ought to do with America's national energy. What we ought to do with America's national energy policy is turn it over to North Dakota and let us run all 50 states, and we'll be booming again in this country.
Well, my response to this is, every one of these areas of energy production has received some support from this government. That's not a bad thing. It means we invest in ourselves. It again, reminds us that our goal is independence. And so the only way we do that is by strengthening everything. And my opponent is giving up on the wind industry. He has said time and time again, he won't support the production tax credit. It's the one area of certainty for that industry, while all the while supporting all of the other certainty for the other areas of energy. So that's where we really disagree.
Thank you. All right, the eighth question. Flood disasters in North Dakota on the Souris, Missouri, and Red Rivers have raised questions about the role and effectiveness of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. What action should Congress take? What action should Congress take to make the Corps more responsive to legitimate needs of communities in North Dakota?
Is it mine?
It is.
Well, you know, in my capacity of working with Senator Dorgan, I worked with the Army Corps of Engineers a great deal on Devil's Lake, on Fargo flood fights, certainly Grand Fork recovery, long-term Wahpeton. And I was here on the ground as we watched what happened with the Missouri River and in Minot with the Souris River, and the debacle. And in my view, how the Army Corps of Engineers totally dropped the ball on that issue. There was no transparency. They did not show a plan. They didn't have the kind of solutions that we needed to help protect those two cities. That's really wrong. We need to hold them accountable for that. And I don't think they've ever really explained what happened there. And so I think the way you do it is, you know, one of my favorite things I used to do with my dad was go with him to the blacksmith. And you know, if you watch a blacksmith, they take heavy pieces of steel and they apply heat and they apply heat and they bend that steel until you get what you want, the kind of action that you want. And that's what we need to do with the Corps. They need to respond to us. And I think one of the first things you do is you do it through their budget. That's how you get their attention. That's what brings the generals and their personnel in the door to talk to you and gets their attention. And I know right now, this unbelievable idea that they're gonna sell us our water from the Missouri River, that's just wrong. There's no way. We'll use every legal action to fight that.
That is time. Mr. Cramer.
Well, I love the illustration of bending them like steel. I just as soon break them, quite honestly. I think the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has been one of the most egregious, overreaching federal agencies, and just like the EPA and the other agencies I've talked about, more of it ought to be turned over to the states. Let me tell you what I believe about the Missouri River system, and I believe it about those reservoirs at Sakakawea and down here south of us as well, that is part of the river. That's our water. So my question is this. My question, as much as anything, is for the state government. Why do we go to their hearings instead of demanding they come to our hearings? That's our water. I think we ought to put our pipes in that water and take it out of there and force them to tell us we can't do it, as opposed to us having to go and get permission from them. That's our water. The Constitution of the United States says it's ours. The laws of the country say it's ours. If we're confident of our position, our legal position to litigate, as my opponent suggests, and I agree that we should use every legal means possible, but I think we ought to start demanding a little more from the Corps rather than just keep showing up year after year after year and sort of wringing our hands. And I agree. Well, let's use the appropriation process if that's what we have to do. But we ought to rein them in just like we rein every other regulatory agency in its time. And not only that, but we'll save in our budget as well. Because if I hadn't mentioned, we have a $16 trillion debt.
Is there any questions for either of you or on the other side?
We're in pretty close agreement on this one.
You've been in agreement on a couple. I wish I could ask more questions. We only have a few minutes left though. So,
oh, darn.
Yeah. So thank you very much for being here tonight, both of you, and answering the questions that we did get to tonight. And you now each have 2 minutes to provide a closing comment.
All right. And I get to go first again?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Nessa. Thanks again for
Yeah.
lending your talents to this. You did a great job, and you did a pretty reasonable job of keeping us on time. You did your part. We weren't always so cooperative. But you know what, you guys? That's the beauty of democracy. And I know that we need to have a ruly crowd and all of those things, and there's something nice about that. But there's also something about rigorous debate and discussion that ends with us disagreeing on some things, but we still get to shake hands. We still serve the same God, the same state, the same country, with the same, hopefully, goals to improve our country. So thanks to you and to everybody for being here, and to the League of Women Voters, and those of you that take the time to watch this on television at some point, if not tonight, whenever it runs. And just thanks for the opportunity to serve. You know, I've had the grand opportunity these last 9 years to be your Public Service Commissioner, overseeing this, what I say is the most dynamic energy economy in the country, where we do manage these resources in a responsible way. It's our charge to ensure that there is good growth that is done in a responsible manner, that is uses efficient use of the resources, that preserves the cultural and natural resources and the well-being of our citizens. It's been a great honor to do that. And I believe that the United States of America has never needed what North Dakota has to offer more than today, with regard to fiscal restraint, with regard to limited government, with regard to growing an economy, with regard to moral standards, with regard to care for our seniors as well as our children. Every generation deserves our care. But ladies and gentlemen, one thing you'll probably learn from me if you haven't yet, is that above all else, America is a free nation still. And of all of the blessings of this great country, whether it's peace, prosperity, safety, all of it's for nothing if we don't remain free. And so I'm committed to that as your congressman. I ask for your vote and your support on November 6th. I look forward to many more of these debates and forums with my opponent, who's been gracious enough to do it with me.
Ms. Donaldson.
Well, thanks again to everybody here. A great audience, good programs, and tough but compelling questions. And to my opponent for being part of it here. You know, North Dakota has one seat in Congress. We have one voice. It has to be a strong voice. It has to be someone who stands up and fights for North Dakota, who takes on the special interests, who takes on the Club for Gross, the Tea Party, who doesn't sign the Grover Norquist pledge, who will only take one pledge, and it's to the people of this great state. And I believe that's me. That's the service that I've always brought to this state. I served for 16 years in the state legislature and worked very, very hard to represent not only my district, but the entire state. And it was a blessing and something I enjoyed greatly. But I took it, obviously, with a tremendous amount of responsibility, because I know that that's what comes with being an elected official. And so I stand in front of you today, again, to offer my service to this country, because I think I have what it takes to help bring that voice, bring that common sense, be very committed to start working together across the aisle and really working for America and getting ready to solve these big, big challenges that we face. Thank you.
Thank you both for being here tonight. I also wish to thank Dakota Media Access, the Bismarck Tribune, and the volunteers from the League of Women Voters for organizing this forum. Thank you, the viewers at home, and the audience members here tonight for taking the time to learn more about the candidates and our issues. This program will replay several times on Government Access Cable Channel 2 and will be available for online viewing at www.freetv.org in the days leading up to the November 6th election. Before we close this candidate forum, I want to remind you that voting information can be found through your county auditor's office. Thank you and good night.
Yeah, that